Before we dive into this story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. These real-life stories come alive when you engage with them, and your support helps us bring even more powerful narratives your way. Now let's begin. It all started on a humid afternoon in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing remarkable ever seemed to happen. The streets were lined with identical houses, trimmed hedges, and the occasional basketball hoop nailed above a garage. To the casual eye, it was just another slice of American life, where kids rode their bikes freely and neighbors waved at one another while mowing the lawn. But beneath that polished surface, tension sometimes lingered, tension born from prejudice, from assumptions, from the subtle ways people dismissed each other's truths. That afternoon, a police cruiser rolled slowly down the block, its lights not flashing, but its presence carrying weight. Inside sat Officer Daniels, a man in his 40s who had been on the force long enough to feel hardened, maybe even jaded. He prided himself on spotting lies, on reading people quickly, and believing his instincts were always right. When he pulled up near the corner, he noticed a small crowd had gathered outside one of the homes. A young black girl, maybe 13 or 14, stood in the center, her arms folded tightly across her chest. Her voice was steady, but anyone listening closely could hear the tremor beneath it. "She's coming," the girl said firmly. "My mom's on her way. She's in special forces." The officer let out a laugh. Not cruel, but dismissive, sharp enough to slice through the air like a slap. "Special forces? Kid, do you even know what that means?" The crowd murmured. Some shook their heads, others smirked. The girl didn't flinch. Her dark eyes locked onto the officer's, burning with a mixture of defiance and desperation. "Yes, I know what it means," she answered. "And I know who my mom is." Daniels leaned back slightly, resting his hand casually on his belt. He had heard it all before. Kids making wild claims, trying to impress, spinning stories that fell apart the moment someone asked a single probing question. To him, this was no different. He chuckled again, this time more openly, and a couple of bystanders laughed with him. But what Daniels couldn't see was the storm raging inside that young girl. Every word of doubt, every smirk, every dismissive laugh struck her like a blow. She wasn't trying to brag. She wasn't seeking attention. She was simply stating a truth so unbelievable to them that it seemed like a joke. Minutes stretched longer than they should have. The sun dipped lower, shadows growing on the pavement. Daniels shook his head, muttering something under his breath about kids these days. He reached for his notepad, ready to file this away as just another pointless call, nothing serious. And then the sound came, low at first, almost imperceptible. The deep rumble of a military-grade vehicle pulling into the neighborhood. Heads turned. The air shifted. The girl's chin lifted ever so slightly, her eyes glimmering with vindication. From around the corner, a matte black SUV rolled into view, its tinted windows reflecting the orange streaks of the setting sun. It wasn't a regular family car. It had presence, authority. It looked like something that belonged on a base, not in a quiet cul-de-sac. The crowd fell silent. Daniel's smirk faltered. The SUV came to a slow, deliberate stop. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a woman whose very posture commanded respect. She wore no uniform, no obvious insignia, but everything about her screamed discipline. Her stance, her sharp gaze, the measured way she scanned the scene before her. Her presence alone seemed to silence the doubts hanging in the air. The girl's lips curled into the faintest of smiles. "That's my mom," she whispered. For the first time that afternoon, Officer Daniels had no words. The silence that followed her arrival felt almost physical, pressing down on everyone present. The woman closed the door of the SUV with a calm precision, as if even the smallest movement had been trained into muscle memory. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. Authority radiated from her like heat from asphalt on a summer day. She walked toward the group, boots striking the pavement with measured steps. The girl straightened, her whole body releasing a tension she had carried for far too long. Her mother was here now, and that meant everything would be different. Officer Daniels tried to recover his composure. He cleared his throat and squared his shoulders, but his earlier smugness had drained away. "Ma'am," he began, voice wobbling despite his attempt at control. "This young lady claimed you were, well, she said you were in special forces." The woman's gaze cut to him, and in that single glance, he realized she didn't need to prove anything. Her eyes held the weight of experience, of things seen and survived that people like him could never imagine. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply stood there, calm but unshakably firm. "That young lady," she said, her voice smooth but carrying an edge of steel, "is my daughter, and when she tells you something, you would be wise to believe her." Murmurs rippled through the small crowd. Neighbors who had chuckled earlier now shifted uneasily, as if ashamed of their laughter. The girl's face lit up with pride. She wasn't just telling the truth, her mother had confirmed it, and done so in a way that left no room for doubt. Daniels swallowed hard. "I didn't mean any disrespect," he muttered, but the words sounded hollow. His posture betrayed him. His hand brushed against his belt again, not as a gesture of authority this time, but of uncertainty, like a man searching for something solid to hold onto. The woman stepped closer, closing the space between them until he could see the faint scars along her hands, the calluses of someone who had trained relentlessly, who had held weapons not for show but for survival. She leaned just slightly forward, her voice low enough that it carried weight without needing volume. "Disrespect," she said, "is laughing at a child who speaks the truth. Disrespect is assuming that because she's young, or because she's black, her words carry less weight. And disrespect, officer, is forgetting that honor is not something you wear on a badge. It's something you live." Her words struck deeper than any shout could have. Daniels felt them coil inside his chest, exposing him. He had laughed so easily, dismissed so casually, never thinking for a moment that he might be wrong. And now, standing in front of this woman who seemed forged from grit and sacrifice, he realized the smallness of his arrogance. The daughter moved closer to her mother, slipping her hand into hers. For all her toughness, the woman's grip softened around her child's fingers. That small act of tenderness spoke louder than any declaration of rank or title. The crowd watched in silence, caught between awe and discomfort. People who had once whispered to each other now stared at the ground, unwilling to meet the girl's eyes. They had doubted her too. They had laughed. And now, confronted with proof, they carried the shame of their disbelief. Daniels cleared his throat again, searching for a way out. "Look, I didn't know," he said, forcing a chuckle that didn't land. "Kids say things. You never know what's true." The woman's eyes didn't waver. "Then maybe you should start listening more carefully," she replied. "Because sometimes, the truth sounds unbelievable, until you see it standing right in front of you." Her words hung in the air like a verdict. The girl squeezed her mother's hand and, for the first time that day, allowed herself a full smile. It wasn't just pride. It was vindication, a lifting of the weight that had pressed on her since the moment she had spoken up. She had been doubted, ridiculed, but she had stood her ground. And now everyone knew the truth. The SUV loomed behind them, the late sun glinting off its windows like a silent witness. The mother gave a nod toward her daughter, then to the officer. "We're done here," she said simply, as if closing a chapter. She turned, leading her daughter back toward the vehicle. Daniels watched them go, a gnawing unease twisting in his gut. He had built his career on assumptions, on quick judgments. And in a single afternoon, a teenage girl and her mother had dismantled that illusion. But this wasn't the end of the story. For the girl, this moment wasn't just about proving her mother's identity. It was about reclaiming her voice in a world too quick to silence it. For Daniels, it marked the beginning of questions he could no longer avoid. And for the crowd, it left a shadow, a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truths. As the SUV pulled away, its engine humming low and steady, the block fell into an uneasy quiet. No one dared laugh now. The morning after the incident, the neighborhood felt different. The streets, once just ordinary stretches of asphalt and sidewalks, carried a new weight, a reminder of the day a young girl and her mother had shattered assumptions, leaving everyone who had witnessed it, especially Officer Daniels, with lingering questions. The sun rose slowly, washing over the houses in a warm glow, but the warmth did little to soften the tension in the air. Inside her bedroom, the girl sat cross-legged on the floor, her laptop open but untouched. Memories of yesterday's events replayed vividly, each detail sharper than the last. She could hear, almost as if it were happening again, the dismissive laughter, the snide comments, the disbelief. And yet, she also remembered the moment her mother appeared. The calm authority, the unwavering presence, the words that had carved through the layers of doubt and skepticism. Her phone buzzed incessantly, notifications piling up with messages from friends, classmates, and even strangers who had heard about what had happened. Some were congratulatory, some incredulous, and some expressed outright admiration. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure where to begin. She wanted to respond to everyone, to explain what had really happened, but words seemed both too much and not enough. How could she capture the gravity of being doubted, of being laughed at, and then vindicated all in one afternoon? Meanwhile, Officer Daniels was having a morning that felt markedly different from his usual routine. Sitting at his small kitchen table, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee, he couldn't stop replaying the previous day in his mind. Each time he thought he had analyzed the encounter fully, a new detail emerged, gnawing at his sense of judgment. The way the woman had walked, the way she carried herself, the quiet authority in her voice. It was all so precise, so unshakable, and it had struck him in ways he hadn't expected. He thought about the laughter, how easily he had dismissed the girl, how quickly he had assumed the story was false, how comfortable it had felt to believe he was right without evidence. Now, sitting alone, he realized that the comfort had been an illusion. For the first time in years, he questioned not just what he believed, but why he believed it. And he found himself unable to shake a certain bitterness. Not at the girl or her mother, but at himself, for being so quick to judge, so blind to the truth when it was right in front of him. At school, the girl faced a mix of reactions. Some classmates approached her with curiosity, others with envy, and a few with lingering doubt. The teachers had heard snippets of what had happened and now treated her with a cautious respect that felt both unfamiliar and welcome. But amidst all the attention, the girl remained grounded, tethered to the memory of her mother's calm, measured words. They had not only validated her story, they had given her the courage to stand firm in her own voice, to recognize that truth has a weight all its own, regardless of who believes it. Across the neighborhood, whispers traveled from house to house. Conversations that had once revolved around mundane topics, the weather, the local school board, weekend plans, now included speculation about the woman in black boots, about her daughter, and about Officer Daniels. The encounter had left ripples, small but potent, that unsettled the familiar order of things. Some people felt admiration, others discomfort, and a few, an unspoken acknowledgement that the world was not always as simple as it appeared. Daniels, meanwhile, went through the motions of his day, answering calls, writing reports, and attending briefings. But his mind was elsewhere, circling around the events of yesterday, lingering on the expressions, the unspoken truths, and the undeniable authority of the woman he had so casually dismissed. He even found himself reflecting on his own career, on moments where assumptions had guided his actions, and on the countless times he had believed his own judgment over evidence, over facts, over people. The girl, for her part, felt a quiet pride. She knew that the story of her mother's arrival would spread, that the image of that authoritative presence in her neighborhood would linger in the minds of everyone who witnessed it. But more than anything, she understood the lesson she carried forward. Standing by the truth, even when others laugh or scoff, is an act of courage. And sometimes, courage is not measured by defiance alone, but by the quiet confidence in one's own convictions, supported by the unwavering presence of those who have walked the path before you. As the day stretched on, both the girl and Officer Daniels were left with a shared understanding, though unspoken. Reality often defies expectations, and truth can be stronger than the most confident disbelief. For the girl, it was a moment of affirmation and growth. For Daniels, it was a reckoning, an unsettling shift in perspective that would follow him far beyond the quiet streets of that suburban block. The day following the confrontation, the woman who had quietly and decisively shut down Officer Daniels' disbelief returned to her own routines, but nothing felt normal. She had lived through countless operations, missions that demanded precision, courage, and composure under pressure. But standing in that suburban street, commanding respect without a uniform, had been a different kind of challenge. It was not the tactical maneuvers, the drills, or the combat training that defined the moment. It was the weight of expectation, the responsibility of proving a young girl's truth to a world too quick to doubt. Back at her home, she prepared for the day with a methodical focus. Coffee brewed on the counter, the aroma mingling with the faint scent of gun oil and training mats lingering from previous drills in the garage. She moved with deliberate precision, each action controlled and measured, a habit drilled into her over years of service. Even the simplest tasks, like making breakfast or checking her messages, carried a sense of discipline and order. Her mind, however, was partially elsewhere, replaying the scene from the day before. The neighborhood had changed. Subtle glances followed her from behind curtains. Quiet whispers of awe and curiosity spread like wildfire. Children she had never met stopped in the street, pointing, trying to catch a glimpse of the woman who had made a police officer rethink everything he thought he knew. Adults, too, felt the shift, the recalibration of assumptions, the uncomfortable realization that authority does not always wear a badge, and that strength and credibility can come from unexpected sources. Officer Daniels, meanwhile, found himself walking the fine line between introspection and professional unease. His colleagues noticed a change in him. He was quieter in meetings, slower to offer judgments, and uncharacteristically hesitant when directing subordinates. Internally, he wrestled with a mixture of pride, shame, and disbelief. Pride for being in law enforcement, for understanding the importance of rules and structure, but shame, undeniable shame, for the ease with which he had dismissed a child's truth based on nothing more than age and skin color. The woman, fully aware of the ripples her presence had caused, approached the day with a careful balance of humility and strength. She maintained her routines, trained when necessary, and checked in with her daughter, ensuring that the girl's confidence was nurtured but not inflated. She knew the story would grow in the community, amplified by the natural curiosity and gossip of human nature. And she also knew the weight of visibility, how quickly admiration can shift into scrutiny, and how easily courage can be misunderstood. That afternoon, the mother and daughter returned to the scene of the previous day, not to relive the confrontation, but to quietly reclaim the space as part of their life. Neighbors nodded, some hesitantly, some with newfound respect. The girl walked with a small spring in her step, her mother's presence beside her a steady reminder of the power of truth and preparation. For both of them, this was more than just a lesson in authority. It was a lesson in resilience, in navigating a world that often questions the right people for the wrong reasons. Officer Daniels encountered them again briefly as he patrolled the area. This time, he did not laugh. He did not scoff. His approach was measured, cautious, and uncertain, as if each step carried the weight of his previous misjudgment. "Ma'am," he said, voice subdued, I understand now." She nodded once, simply, acknowledging the recognition without indulging in satisfaction. There was no need to gloat. The point had been made, the truth confirmed, and the lesson etched not just in her daughter, but in the man who had underestimated them both. In the days that followed, the incident became the topic of conversation far beyond the neighborhood. Social media posts circulated, news articles were written, and the story of the young girl and her mother's quiet, commanding authority spread like wildfire. Some questioned the veracity of the reports until photos and videos surfaced, showing the mother walking confidently, the girl standing tall beside her, and the unmistakable, humbled expression on Officer Daniels' face. Yet, even with all the attention, the woman remained grounded. She knew the story's power was not in fame or recognition, but in the validation of truth. It was about teaching her daughter and the broader community that integrity, courage, and authenticity cannot be manufactured or feigned. They must be lived, even in moments when disbelief seems overwhelming. For Daniels, the experience marked the beginning of a quiet transformation. He began listening more closely, questioning assumptions, and reflecting on the biases he had unknowingly carried into his work. The lesson was subtle yet profound. Authority is not about hierarchy or badges alone. It is about character, presence, and the courage to stand by the truth, even when it challenges the world around you. By the end of that week, the streets of the neighborhood had returned to their usual rhythm, but the echoes of the encounter lingered. Conversations were tinged with a new respect, glances carried unspoken acknowledgement, and the memory of that afternoon remained vivid. The young girl, now more confident than ever, walked taller, knowing she had been heard. Her mother, a quiet sentinel of strength, continued to guide her, embodying the truth that courage and discipline leave marks far deeper than fear or doubt ever could. Word of the incident traveled faster than anyone had anticipated. By midweek, what had started as a small confrontation in a quiet suburban street had morphed into a story shared across social media, local news feeds, and community forums. The video clips, though brief, captured the moment with shocking clarity. The young girl standing her ground, the dismissive laughter of Officer Daniels, and the commanding entrance of her mother. Each frame carried a quiet intensity, a narrative of truth challenging disbelief, and people were captivated. At school, the girl felt the attention like a wave crashing over her. Some students approached with wide-eyed admiration, asking questions about her mother's career, the girl's own experiences, and the courage it had taken to speak up. Teachers, initially cautious, now spoke to her with subtle pride, incorporating discussions about integrity and confidence into classroom conversations. Even students who had doubted her now nodded in acknowledgement, though some carried a hint of shame for having laughed or whispered behind her back. The mother, meanwhile, found herself navigating the unexpected spotlight with characteristic composure. Invitations to speak at local events arrived, requests for interviews appeared in inboxes, and messages from people she had never met expressed gratitude for showcasing the courage to stand firm. She declined most of the attention, knowing that the story was about her daughter, not her own recognition. Yet she understood the significance, the impact of visibility, of a single demonstration of integrity, and the inspiration it could provide to countless others. Officer Daniels' daily routine became a landscape of quiet reflection. Each call, each report, each interaction with the public reminded him of the previous encounter. He noticed biases he had ignored, assumptions he had taken for granted, and judgments he had rendered without evidence. The incident had become a mirror, reflecting his own limitations, and he found himself questioning how often he had dismissed voices similar to hers simply because they didn't fit the narrative he expected. In the neighborhood, conversations buzzed with speculation and admiration. Parents spoke to their children about the importance of honesty, bravery, and standing by the truth. Neighbors exchanged nods of acknowledgement whenever the girl or her mother walked by, and some even paused to ask questions, eager to understand how such a quiet yet powerful presence could command respect without overt authority. It was a subtle shift, a recalibration of perception that went unnoticed by many, but deeply felt by those who experienced it firsthand. The girl began journaling her experiences, attempting to process the whirlwind of events that had unfolded. She wrote about fear, doubt, courage, and pride. She detailed the moment her mother had stepped into the street, the way Officer Daniels had faltered, and the complex emotions that had surged through her own body. Writing became a refuge, a place to explore the nuances of truth, perception, and the delicate balance between authority and respect. Meanwhile, Daniels sought counsel from mentors and colleagues, though he struggled to articulate the full scope of his internal shift. He spoke cautiously, careful not to appear vulnerable, but the honesty of his reflection resonated. He recognized the importance of listening, of validating others' experiences, and of confronting his own preconceptions. Slowly, he began implementing changes in how he approached calls, how he interacted with both colleagues and civilians, and how he assessed credibility in ways that were more equitable and less influenced by bias. Back at home, the mother continued to guide her daughter, reinforcing lessons learned while emphasizing humility. She reminded her that courage was not a performance but a commitment to truth, integrity, and standing firm even when others doubted. She encouraged her daughter to embrace her voice fully, knowing that the impact of yesterday would ripple far beyond the confines of their street, reaching individuals and communities who might never have considered the power of quiet strength. By the end of the week, what had begun as a tense confrontation had evolved into a broader story of awareness and inspiration. The young girl had found her voice. Her mother had demonstrated the tangible weight of integrity, and Officer Daniels had embarked on a journey of self-reflection and growth. For the community, it became a narrative about the unexpected ways in which courage manifests, the subtle lessons embedded in everyday interactions, and the reminder that truth, when met with conviction, can change hearts and minds. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces between school, home, and work, the girl and her mother shared a simple understanding. They had not only proven a point, they had illuminated a path, one that others might follow, and in doing so, reminded the world that the most profound authority is not always displayed on a uniform, but lived through actions, presence, and unwavering commitment to the truth. By the following week, the story had gained momentum far beyond the suburban streets where it began. Social media platforms were alight with posts, videos, and discussions dissecting every moment of the encounter. Memes emerged, articles were written, and local news stations covered the story as a small feature, highlighting not only the girl's courage but the unwavering presence of her mother. What had started as a personal vindication had grown into a conversation about trust, authority, and the dangers of assumptions. In her home, the girl sat on her bed, scrolling through the countless posts and messages. Each one brought a mix of emotions: validation, pride, surprise, and at times discomfort. People she had never met praised her bravery, while others questioned the details or speculated about the circumstances. The constant stream of attention was overwhelming, but her mother's calm presence beside her grounded her. "Remember," her mother said gently, "it's not about proving yourself to everyone. It's about knowing your truth and standing by it. Let the world react as it will." The girl nodded, internalizing the lesson with a depth that only experience could teach. Yesterday, she had spoken her truth to a single skeptical officer. Today, her voice resonated across countless platforms and communities. And while the attention was thrilling, it was also a reminder of responsibility. The responsibility to remain grounded, to act with integrity, and to ensure that courage never became arrogance. Officer Daniels, on the other hand, was navigating a storm of internal conflict. He had become aware of social media posts circulating in his community and saw that the story had reached far beyond the neighborhood. Friends and colleagues had asked him about the incident, some teasing, others genuinely curious. But what cut deepest was the reflection in his own mind, the realization that he had underestimated not just a child, but the weight of truth, the power of conviction, and the presence of someone who had earned respect through action, not assumption. At the precinct, Daniels found himself avoiding small talk, struggling to concentrate, and increasingly introspective. His colleagues noticed a subtle change. He no longer offered snap judgments, he listened more carefully, and he questioned reports more thoughtfully. Conversations about bias and perception became unavoidable, and Daniels confronted the unsettling reality that his career had been shaped, in part, by assumptions he had never critically examined. Meanwhile, the girls' school became a microcosm of the broader ripple effect. Teachers incorporated discussions about integrity and courage into their lessons. Students debated assumptions and respect, reflecting on the social dynamics that had unfolded before them. The girl herself became a subtle leader, guiding conversations with wisdom beyond her years. Her classmates were learning not only about her mother's exceptional discipline but also about the courage it takes to assert truth in the face of doubt, a lesson that resonated far more deeply than any textbook could convey. The mother, observing all this, understood the long-term implications. She realized that what had begun as a simple act of affirmation, standing beside her daughter, had transformed into an opportunity for education, awareness, and social reflection. She encouraged her daughter to engage thoughtfully with questions and opinions, to understand that influence comes not from spectacle but from authenticity. As the days progressed, Officer Daniels reached a point of reckoning. Alone in his office one evening, he reviewed the sequence of events, replaying the video clips and reconsidering his behavior. He recognized patterns of dismissiveness, prejudice, and arrogance he had allowed to govern his judgments. And in that quiet moment, he committed to change, to listen more carefully, to question his biases, and to recognize that authority is earned through respect and integrity, not assumed by position alone. Across the neighborhood, the story continued to resonate. Parents used it as an example for their children. Community leaders referenced it in conversations about responsibility and trust, and the girl and her mother quietly observed the profound impact of their experience. It was a reminder that the smallest acts, when carried out with integrity and courage, can ripple outward in ways no one can anticipate. And while the attention would fade over time, the lessons remained. For the girl, it was the affirmation of her own voice. For her mother, it was the power of presence and action. And for Officer Daniels, it was a reckoning with his own assumptions and a newfound understanding that respect is earned. Truth cannot be denied, and courage often appears in the most unexpected forms. Not long after the story began circulating online, the girl and her mother faced a new wave of scrutiny. While many celebrated their courage, others sought to diminish it, questioning the authenticity of her mother's career or suggesting the situation had been exaggerated. Social media, ever hungry for controversy, churned with debates that ranged from admiring to accusatory, and for the first time, the girl felt the weight of public opinion pressing in. At school, whispers followed her in the hallways. Some classmates were supportive, offering quiet encouragement, while others glared or muttered behind her back, daring to challenge the narrative they had only seen through snippets and headlines. Teachers tried to shield her, but the ripple effect of online attention was impossible to contain. The girl, who had once simply wished to be believed by a single police officer, now found herself navigating a complex landscape where truth, perception, and rumor collided. Her mother, perceptive and experienced, recognized the storm before it fully hit. "Ignore the noise," she advised, voice steady and calm. "Focus on what you know is true. Let others react however they will. Their doubts do not define you." Yet even with these words, the tension was palpable. In the grocery store, strangers stared. Online comments ranged from praise to venom, and a local radio station invited guests to discuss whether the incident had been staged. The mother remained composed, but she knew that in this environment, perception could be as powerful as reality. She decided to take proactive steps, not to argue but to educate. She arranged small talks at community centers, sharing her experiences in the special forces and emphasizing the lessons of discipline, integrity, and presence. Meanwhile, Officer Daniels faced a different kind of pressure. News outlets had picked up the story, framing it as a tale of disbelief confronted by undeniable truth. While some of his peers admired his professionalism, others criticized his initial reaction. Emails from superiors and citizens alike filled his inbox, and he realized that the encounter had not just changed him internally, it had created ripple effects that extended into his professional life. Each email, each comment, reminded him that the world now scrutinized not only the girl and her mother but also his judgment, choices, and conduct. The girl's experience at school mirrored the broader societal tension. While many students now regarded her with newfound respect, some teachers and administrators faced pressure from parents who questioned the handling of the incident. Rumors and assumptions swirled, creating a delicate balance where truth and public perception existed in tension. Every interaction became a test, not of courage alone, but of patience, composure, and understanding the long-term consequences of standing up for one's truth. At home, the mother introduced more structured routines to help her daughter manage the growing attention. She encouraged journaling, reflection, and thoughtful engagement with supporters and critics alike. She explained that navigating recognition and scrutiny required as much discipline and strategy as any mission she had undertaken in her military career. The girl absorbed the guidance, gradually learning to separate her self-worth from external opinion, recognizing that courage is most powerful when paired with clarity, humility, and foresight. Daniels, in parallel, began a rigorous internal process. He scheduled sessions with mentors to examine bias, to explore the roots of dismissive behavior, and to develop methods for more equitable judgment. He read extensively about authority, perception, and the psychological toll of assumptions, determined to prevent a repeat of his earlier misstep. Each reflection forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about his own limitations, and while progress was gradual, he could feel subtle shifts in the way he approached interactions both on and off duty. Despite the challenges, the mother and daughter's relationship strengthened. They navigated public scrutiny together, finding solace in each other's presence. The girl's confidence grew, not arrogance, but an empowered understanding that truth, when presented with courage and integrity, will withstand scrutiny and challenge. The mother's example became a living lesson, teaching that influence comes not from attention alone, but from the consistent demonstration of character under pressure. The neighborhood, too, had begun to change. Conversations no longer focused solely on the mundane. Instead, people discussed courage, credibility, and respect. Even those who had initially mocked the girl were forced to reconsider their assumptions, realizing that appearances could be deceiving and that strength often lies hidden beneath humility and quiet presence. As the week drew to a close, the challenges faced by the girl and her mother had forged a subtle but powerful transformation, not only in themselves, but also in the community and the police officer who had first doubted them. They had faced ridicule, doubt, and scrutiny, yet emerged more grounded, more resilient, and more certain of their truth than ever. The stage was set for the next chapter, where lessons learned, courage tested, and authority redefined would continue to ripple outward, leaving marks far beyond that quiet suburban street. By the following week, the ripple effect of the incident had expanded even further, touching lives in ways the girl and her mother had not anticipated. Local community groups began discussing it as a case study in credibility, courage, and respect. Meetings at schools, libraries, and youth centers included conversations about listening, bias, and the importance of validating others' experiences. The story of the girl and her mother had become more than a personal vindication. It had become a lesson in empathy and awareness. The girl, though still navigating the mix of admiration and scrutiny, began to understand her own growing influence. In small, thoughtful ways, she engaged with peers who doubted her, demonstrating patience and composure. She explained the importance of truth, integrity, and standing firm in one's convictions, even when facing ridicule. Her voice, once quiet and uncertain, now carried a subtle authority. People listened, not merely because she was the center of a viral story, but because she spoke with clarity, honesty, and courage, a combination that demanded attention. Her mother continued to guide her with the calm expertise that had defined her life in special forces. She emphasized that influence without responsibility could be dangerous, and that true courage often meant quietly modeling behavior rather than seeking validation. Every action we take, she told her daughter, sends a message. We can shape how people perceive truth, but only if we act with integrity and awareness. The girl absorbed these lessons, realizing that courage alone was not enough. It required discipline, reflection, and mindfulness. Officer Daniels, meanwhile, had begun to apply his reflections in practical ways. At the precinct, he actively sought to listen more carefully to both colleagues and civilians. He paused before forming judgments, questioned his assumptions, and made an effort to recognize voices that might previously have been dismissed. Some colleagues noticed the change and were skeptical, while others were inspired. For Daniels, it was an ongoing process, one that challenged years of ingrained behavior, but he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't before, a drive to become a better officer, a better listener, and a more thoughtful human being. The neighborhood itself was subtly shifting. Conversations in front yards and at local cafes now included discussions about integrity, respect, and the importance of listening. Parents encouraged their children to speak their truths, reminding them that age, appearance, or background should never diminish the weight of their words. Even long-standing tensions between families began to ease, replaced by a shared understanding that fairness and honesty mattered more than snap judgments or superficial impressions. Across the broader public sphere, media coverage expanded beyond the initial incident, emphasizing the lessons it had created. Articles, social media posts, and discussions focused on mentorship, the importance of listening to marginalized voices, and the courage required to confront disbelief. While some commentators debated the specifics, the central truth remained clear. A young girl's honesty, reinforced by her mother's unwavering presence, compelled adults and peers alike to reconsider their assumptions. The girl found comfort in small, reflective rituals, writing, conversing with her mother, and quietly processing the past week's lessons. She understood that the story had grown beyond proving a single point. It was about shaping perceptions, influencing culture, and inspiring courage in others. Her mother, quietly proud, guided her, emphasizing thoughtful engagement, balancing influence with humility and authority with compassion. Officer Daniels, too, felt the ripple effects of the incident. He noticed improvements in his interactions at work, a deeper capacity to connect with people, and a sharpened awareness of bias. The episode acted as a mirror, reflecting flaws he hadn't fully acknowledged, and he embraced the opportunity for growth. Each interaction became a test of the lessons he had learned, reinforcing the importance of listening and thoughtful judgment. By the end of the week, all three, girl, mother, and Officer Daniels, had experienced subtle but profound transformations. The girl had discovered her voice and the confidence to navigate public attention with dignity. Her mother demonstrated the enduring power of presence, mentorship, and integrity. Daniels embarked on a journey of self-reflection, recognizing his biases and committing to long-term personal growth. Together, their shared experience exemplified how courage, truth, and disciplined action can ripple outward, challenging assumptions, inspiring change, and reshaping community perceptions. As the story circulated further, regional news picked up viral clips, framing the encounter as an emblem of courage, integrity, and the dangers of underestimating anyone based on appearances. Social media amplified the narrative, with hashtags celebrating the girl's bravery trending alongside discussions about trust, authority, and resilience. Educators across the district leveraged the incident as a teaching moment, illustrating respect, the perils of quick judgments, and the ethical weight of doubting someone without evidence. Students debated these lessons, and the girl, initially overwhelmed, began receiving messages from peers across towns and states, thanking her for inspiring them to stand by their own truths. The mother, ever composed, recognized the broader significance of their story. Invitations arrived for speaking engagements at youth programs, mentorship workshops, and community events. She emphasized discipline, presence, and integrity, teaching that courage often manifests quietly but, when combined with preparation and consistency, commands undeniable respect. Daniels felt pressure differently. The regional coverage meant his initial dismissal of the girl was scrutinized by superiors and the public. Emails and calls arrived, some critical, others supportive. He navigated a delicate balance, acknowledging error without undermining authority, demonstrating growth without seeming performative, aware that every decision would now be viewed through the lens of his past misjudgment. Subtle shifts in perception emerged in the community. Conversations in local businesses, centers, and social gatherings increasingly revolved around fairness, respect, and integrity. Parents cited the girl's story as an example for their children. Even initially skeptical neighbors acknowledged the importance of evidence, character, and lived experience. Growing confident, the girl began using her voice intentionally, engaging thoughtfully online and responding to peers. Her mother guided her, stressing humility and measured interaction, ensuring their public narrative remained grounded in truth rather than spectacle. Daniels learned from the girl's example, observing the power of patience, authenticity, and quiet confidence. He applied these lessons professionally, listening attentively, questioning assumptions, and striving to interact fairly with colleagues and civilians. The neighborhood itself subtly transformed. Ordinary streets carried the weight of reflection. Conversations expanded beyond trivialities to touch on ethics, respect, and validation. Children observed the girl and her mother, learning lessons that textbooks could never fully convey. Adults reconsidered assumptions, recognizing that authority stems from character, not position. Over time, the girl, her mother, and Daniels experienced interconnected growth. The girl gained confidence to assert her truth and inspire others. Her mother showed the influence of preparation and integrity. Daniels embraced self-reflection and growth. Their experience became a living demonstration of how courage and disciplined action can challenge assumptions, inspire change, and transform perceptions. Weeks later, the emotional weight of the story settled more deeply. The viral attention gave way to nuanced reflection. Courage was not a single act but a continuous practice. Every glance, whisper, and interaction reminded the girl of the world's attention and the expectation to continue standing. Her mother noted the intensity in her daughter's demeanor and guided her, emphasizing that influence carries responsibility and courage must be accompanied by wisdom and reflection. Daniels grappled with internal struggle. His initial inaction was repeatedly referenced in discussions on authority and judgment. He felt guilt, humility, and determination. Guilt for doubting the girl, humility at recognizing the narrowness of his perception, and determination to embody the lessons for professional and moral growth. The story had evolved beyond a neighborhood encounter into a symbol of broader principles. Listening to marginalized voices, questioning assumptions, and acting with integrity. Parents, students, and community leaders used it as a teaching tool, illustrating how even small acts can catalyze reflection and dialogue. The girl began journaling more intensively, analyzing emotional and social currents. She processed fear, doubt, and courage, channeling insights into leadership. Her mother encouraged translating personal experience into broader lessons for others. Daniels also adopted reflective practice, reviewing footage and reinforcing lessons of humility, listening, and responsibility. He mentored younger officers, illustrating that leadership requires empathy and confronting one's own biases. The neighborhood had transformed. Streets carried awareness. Conversations touched on integrity, trust, and courage. Children observed role models in action. Adults reconsidered assumptions. Together, the girl and her mother balanced engagement with reflection, avoiding sensationalism while prioritizing integrity over approval. Courage combined with discipline, humility, and consistency inspired change across the community. By the chapter's end, the girl had found her voice, the mother exemplified integrity, and Daniels embarked on lasting growth. The story became a testament to truth, courage, and human connection. The mother, ever vigilant, continued guiding her daughter, teaching her to handle attention without losing authenticity, respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively, and prioritize substance over spectacle. The world will always have opinions, she reminded her daughter, but your integrity is yours alone. Protect it, nurture it, and let it guide your every move. Officer Daniels faced mounting challenges as the story became a case study for community outreach and police training. Supervisors highlighted his initial reaction as an example of implicit bias, teaching younger officers the importance of listening and questioning assumptions. Daniels, humbled and daunted, dedicated himself to becoming more empathetic, perceptive, and fair, realizing the far-reaching consequences of a single moment of disbelief. The neighborhood reflected the story's influence. Conversations in coffee shops, parks, and stores increasingly emphasized respect, integrity, and courage. Parents used the girl's experience as a lesson for their children, and long-standing disputes softened into discussions about fairness. The ripple effect of truth and courage extended far beyond the street where it began. The girl began journaling regularly, reflecting on resilience, perception, and influence. Her writings explored the power of truth, the responsibility of visibility, and how courage inspires action. Her mother encouraged this practice, guiding her to turn personal insight into lessons for others. Daniels integrated similar reflections into his professional life, mentoring officers about bias, active listening, and credibility assessment. He shared his experiences publicly to demonstrate the subtle ways authority can be misapplied, turning error into a catalyst for meaningful change. Managing public attention became a careful task for the girl and her mother. They declined exploitative interviews, redirected inquiries toward constructive forums, and focused on education, mentoring, and community engagement, reinforcing that courage paired with intentionality, integrity, and humility has the greatest impact. By the 11th week, all three, girl, mother, and Daniels, had experienced profound growth. The girl's confidence and leadership solidified. Her mother's mentorship inspired others, and Daniel's transformation highlighted the enduring influence of truth, courage, and reflection. The neighborhood itself had evolved, embodying subtle yet meaningful shifts in perceptions of respect, credibility, and human potential. The stage was set for a community forum, organized by local leaders, where the girl and her mother would share lessons on integrity, courage, and leadership. Invitations had come from schools, community centers, and organizations, creating a culmination of weeks of reflection, attention, and scrutiny. The forum hall filled with spectators, educators, parents, and students, cameras lining the edges, journalists taking notes, and anticipation echoing in whispers. The girl's heartbeat quickened, but her mother's calm presence reminded her that this moment was about substance, not spectacle. Speaking candidly, the girl shared her experience, the officer's disbelief, her own doubts and fears, and her mother's unwavering support, emphasizing courage, integrity, and humility. Her words resonated, earning nods, quiet applause, and a deep sense of connection. Her mother then shared her perspective, highlighting Special Forces training, discipline, and the importance of mentorship. She stressed that courage is cultivated through consistent action, preparation, and standing firm despite doubt. Her narrative intertwined with her daughter's, demonstrating generational reinforcement of leadership and integrity. Daniels, attending quietly, reflected on the profound impact of a single moment of disbelief and the lessons he had gleaned. By the session's end, he experienced reconciliation, recognizing that respect, empathy, and awareness are learned through reflection and engagement with truth. Community members approached the women, expressing admiration and seeking guidance on resilience, mentorship, and everyday courage. Daniels engaged as well, acknowledging past mistakes and demonstrating the importance of listening, validating experiences, and continuous self-improvement. The neighborhood embraced integrity, credibility, and empathy in daily interactions. A single confrontation had catalyzed a movement of awareness, respect, and thoughtful engagement. The forum affirmed the girl and her mother's courage and values. Standing firm in truth created ripples far beyond the moment. Daniels internalized a final lesson in humility and transformation. Understanding growth emerges from confronting doubt and personal limitations. Weeks turned to months, and the encounter's impact continued to resonate. The girl became a subtle leader at school, mentoring peers, encouraging critical thinking, and fostering a culture of respect. Her mother continued guiding her and countless others, emphasizing preparation, discipline, and consistent, thoughtful courage. Daniels applied his reflections professionally, mentoring officers and becoming an advocate for awareness of bias and perception. The community evolved, conversations lingering on integrity and authenticity long after media attention faded. The girl and her mother reflected privately, realizing the story was never about external validation, but about understanding worth, demonstrating courage, and inspiring change through action. Daniels understood that transformation is a continuous process of reflection and deliberate growth. The story stood as a testament to courage, truth, and presence. Moments of doubt catalyzed growth. Integrity inspired a community. Influence was measured by positive change rather than recognition. A single confrontation became a journey of transformation, rippling outward and leaving an enduring legacy. As the sun set, the girl walked beside her mother, feeling the quiet strength that had guided them through doubt and scrutiny. Daniels, observing from afar, carried lessons of humility and awareness forward, knowing they would shape every future interaction. What began with disbelief ended with understanding, growth, and the realization that courage, integrity, and unwavering presence leave an indelible mark, one that no skepticism or obstacle can erase. In that quiet truth, all three recognized the ultimate lesson. Standing firm in what is right can transform lives, inspire generations, and ripple outward far beyond what one person could imagine.